Baubles on a lot to YouTube, 18th of August, first Moondog.
Hello, Patriots, and welcome to First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. I'm Walkley Award-winning editorial cartoonist for The Guardian Australia, First Dog on the Moon. And this week it's time to play Democratastrophe. It's the fun game for all the family where we ask you questions about how terrible politics is, and then at the end, we all go and have a lie down and a bit of a cry. Doesn't that sound like fun? Let's get started with today's game of Democratastrophe. Our first contestant is Australia.
Hello?
Tell us a bit about yourself, Australia.
Oh, well, I'm a population of 23 million people and a land mass of around 8,600,000 square kilometres. And my main exports are...
Isn't that great? Are you ready to play Democratastrophe?
No! Oh, hang on. I mean, yes.
Correct. Here's your first multiple choice question. In response to the vexing issue of same-sex marriage, Prime Minister Abbott has said that while the coalition position is currently not to have a position, which is also no, they may later change their non-position to having a position, specifically that they could well have a position, and this will depend on the outcome of a referendum or plebiscite or even a trilobite, but not at the election some other time possibly. So, is the Prime Minister's position on same-sex marriage that A, he doesn't have a position, B, he will have a position once he's found out what his position is, C, missionary, or D, nobody knows what it is, but when we find out, it'll be fabulous?
C?
Correct. We also would have accepted E, wait, was that a gay joke? And F, I'm going to eat another onion. Question 2. The federal government has an important job to do, running the economy, taxation, overseeing the military, the legislature and the legal system, providing infrastructure and services, and also question time. However, recently it's pretty much stopped doing all of that, except question time, because it has something even more important to do. And what is it? Is it A, putting all its resources towards keeping Tony Abbott Prime Minister, B, ensuring that the Prime Minister moving forward continues to be Tony Abbott the Prime Minister, C, asking the critical question, who is the best person to be the Australian Prime Minister as long as the answer is Tony Abbott? Or D, did I mention Tony Abbott and how he's Prime Minister? And I'm sorry, we don't have time for any more questions.
A?
Correct. Climate change. If the government's 26% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030 will cost the economy $600 million, and at the same time the Australian Labor Party's 40% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030 will cost the economy $600 billion, isn't it time to A, did I mention how the ALP are bad? B, you know, the ALP, they're so awful. C, get new people to calculate how much anything will cost. Or D, we haven't actually costed these policies, we really are just making it all up.
Can I phone a friend?
Of course you can. Yes?
I don't have any friends.
All right. Let's ask our panel of judges. Dyson Hayden. Oh, he was here a minute ago. Andrew Bolt. Australian Test Captain Michael Clark. Well, let's just move on then to our final question. True or false? A meeting of the National Security Committee of the Cabinet recently asked for a list of national security-related things that could be announced weekly between now and the election.
True.
Yes.
Really? They did that?
They did that, yes.
They're not even pretending anymore, are they?
No, they're not.
I don't really feel like playing this game anymore.
Me either. Thanks for listening, Patriots. This has been First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living.
Oh, bye, everyone.
Well, that was just about the size of it. The Australian cricket team lost. Apparently big time, humiliatingly, and I think they were playing in England. So that was the reference to the captain of the Australian cricket team, the Dyson Hayden. Dyson Hayden is the particular hand-chosen captain's pick appointed by Tony Abbott, strangely, to head a royal commission or witch hunt, depending on what side of politics you want to take, into the doings of unions. I think when Dyson Heydon, the commissioner, had Bill Shorten, the leader of the Labor Party, in front of him in his witch hunt, Royal Commission, I think Bill Shorten got to answer 900 questions. And he's been widely pilloried because it was brought to light that when he was running a union, or high up in running a union, he convinced the employers to donate money to the cost, to cover the cost of operating the union, so that the union members not only got one of the better wages and conditions deals inside that particular industry, I think it was cleaners or something like that, but they got low union fees as well. You know, like it was a case of, everybody knows that the Australian Labor Party was founded by the union movement as the political arm of the union movement, and therefore it's not surprising that the unions habitually donate a fair amount of money to the Labor Party, and that money donated by the union movement to the Labor Party normally would be coming from contributions out of the pay packets of the union members. The Liberal and National Party seemed to get the shits that when Bill Shorten was running the union, he was getting the boss to cover the union's operating costs and also to fund staffers in his own electoral office when he was making the pogo stick leap from being a union rep to being a politician. So yeah, Dyson Heydon, he's been grilling the left-wing side of politics in his Royal Commission on Unions, and it turned out that he had been invited to and tentatively agreed to address a Liberal Party fundraising occasion. So it wouldn't matter quite so much were it not for the fact that Dyson Heydon is famous for his really hardline black letter law judgments talking about the perception of corruption. You know, he's gone on at length in his earlier life, before he was a Royal Commissioner, back when he was just a Supreme Court Justice or whatever he was, talking about how vitally important it is not only that there's no corruption, but there's no perception of corruption. So yeah, he was organised to speak at a Liberal Party fundraiser at the same time that he was hammering the unions in an allegedly impartial Royal Commission looking for corruption, because it's an article of faith among the right-wing side of politics that all unions are viciously corrupt. Yeah, so Tony Abbott's tied himself in an enormous knot over whether gay marriage should be legalised, and it's kind of embarrassing, really, because I'm not a homophobe. I've worked a lot with homosexuals back in the days when homosexuals were real homosexuals and had 27 different partners a month. And most of the real homosexuals I worked with, they're all dead because AIDS got them in the 1980s. I was working with them 1980 to 83, and it all happened back then. Whoop, they're not around anymore. So maybe there's a new breed of monogamous homosexuals with which I'm not personally acquainted who actually wants to get married. Or they want to do a permanent pair bonding. I find it difficult personally to understand why homosexuals want to call their long-term relationships a marriage, because they don't have any chance of their copulation resulting in an offspring. And marriage is a social institution that's been cobbled up through the ages in order to provide for the needs of the offspring that are statistically likely to occur when heterosexuals have sex. I just don't see why homosexuals want to call what they do a marriage, because they're not ever going to conceive a child. That's what marriage is for. It's a relationship to care for the child that may be called into existence by the sexual activity. Homosexual activity doesn't conceive children, therefore they don't have a marriage. That's just how I feel. And it's got zero to do with any kind of religious scriptural injunctions. I've never seen anything in the book of God theory I subscribe to that says that there's anything wrong with lesbian sex or homosexual male activity. But it's not a marriage either. So Tony Abbott doesn't want it to be called marriage because he's a staunch, strong Catholic. And he comes from the school of thought that clings onto the idea that homosexual, same-sex attracted people are not born, they are made, they choose to do it. There's a lot of feeling that, and it used to be popular when I was young, that lesbians are definitely made and not born. They have an encounter with a two-stroke Charlie who bashes them while groping them, and that's it. They're turned off men for life, and they look to somebody who's sort of softer and gentler and less of a vicious pain in the ass than the entire male half of the human race as they perceive it, and that's how you get lesbians. I remember thinking that when I was young. There's now apparently a fair bit of well scrutineered medical evidence that says that no, there's a whole bunch of changes in the brain that occur in utero, and people who are same-sex attracted have all those changes. So maybe there's just a kind of brain that's into it. Pretty sure the rate of same-sex attractedness is 1 in 12. It's about 8%. It's 1 in every platoon. It's the same as colour blindness. It's the same as baldness. Nobody quite knows what baldness is good for, but same-sex attracted people, they make really good aunties and uncles. Colourblind people are good at seeing through technicoloured camouflage because they see everything in shades of grey, and their depth perception's better and at picking out camouflage. It's like atheists, really. There's probably 1 in 12 people who are blind to the idea of God. Tony Abbott doesn't want homosexual relationships called marriage. He's suggested having a referendum. What is the bet that because a plebiscite's non-binding and a referendum is, and a referendum can only apply to changing the Constitution, he's talking about amending the Constitution with a clause that says, and marriage will include same-sex relationships. And he's betting on the fact that only 1 out of every 8 referenda that's ever been put to the people has passed, right? He wants to bet on the Australian population saying no to a referendum because they say no to referenda because they're suspicious of changing the Constitution. And he's going to try and use that to politically grease his ass with Vaseline and squeeze through to try and avoid the whole same-sex issue. I hate his reasons for doing it, and I hate the way he's doing it, and it makes it really difficult to stand up for my beliefs, which is that homosexual partnerships are not marriage. Why the hell do they want to call it marriage? That's a bit of a non sequitur to me. Yeah, so in the meantime, Tony Abbott wants Australia to try and reduce its greenhouse gases by 26%, 26 to 28%, which if the whole world was to do that would lock us in for a 4-degree Celsius temperature rise globally by 2100. At the moment, we've already achieved 1 degree, and the extreme intense weather is getting more extreme, more intense, and more frequent. And there's a really well-respected climate scientist who has a history of his predictions, though they were dire predictions, actually turning out to be right on the money. As he made the prediction 10 years ago. The evidence is now exactly what he said it would be. And he says that we're about to get hit by superstorms that may render the planet ungovernable and 5 metres of sea level rise if we only stop at 2 degrees Celsius. But at the moment, we're all on track for between 4 and 7 degrees, and Tony Abbott wants to lock us in to 4 degrees, and 2 degrees will make the planet ungovernable. It will destroy the infrastructure. Basically, the climate scientists are now agreeing with the Warbles on a lot predictions, which is that we're going to keep farting carbon dioxide until the weather dismantles the industrial transport infrastructure that allows global trade to happen, and then the global village's economy will disappear up its own fundamental orifice. And that will be good for the economy, right? Because economic growth is always good for the economy. You ask Tony Abbott. He said he understands that climate science is real, but he's not going to do anything which might clobber the economy just to save the environment. So as long as it's good for the economy, everything's fine, right? And to distract all attention from how he's shitting in the grandchildren's atmosphere, Tony Abbott is deeply, deeply, deeply into the idea of having an enormous shit fight, which he's probably going to lose, but he may possibly be able to manoeuvre his way out of, to do with gay marriage. Anyway, I think that's me 15 minutes. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.